Have you ever looked at someone speaking English so naturally that you wondered, how did they become so fluent? Maybe you've been studying English for months, or even years. You know hundreds of words, you understand grammar, you can read articles and watch videos with subtitles. But the moment someone asks you a simple question in English, your mind goes completely blank. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of English learners around the world experience exactly the same frustration. The good news is that fluency is not a gift that only a few people are born with. It is a skill, and like every skill, it can be trained every single day. I used to believe that becoming fluent required expensive courses, living in an English-speaking country, or having foreign friends. I thought I needed perfect grammar before I could start speaking. I kept waiting for the day when I would finally feel ready. But that day never came. Then I discovered something that completely changed my learning journey. Fluency doesn't come from studying harder. It comes from practicing smarter, every single day. Researchers in psychology have long shown that consistency beats intensity. Spending just 30 to 60 minutes every day on focused practice is often more effective than studying 5 hours once a week. Our brains learn through repetition. Every time we hear, speak, read, or write English, the neural pathways responsible for language become stronger. Over time, those pathways become so efficient that English starts to feel automatic instead of difficult. That realization changed everything for me. Instead of chasing shortcuts, I built a simple daily routine. It wasn't complicated. It didn't require expensive software. It didn't depend on talent. It only required consistency. Day after day, week after week, month after month, I followed the same routine. Slowly, I noticed something amazing. I stopped translating every sentence in my head. I began understanding English naturally. I started speaking with more confidence. Most importantly, I stopped being afraid of making mistakes. The first habit began the moment I woke up. Instead of reaching for social media, I spent the first 15 minutes of my morning with English. This small change made a huge difference. Why? Because our brains are fresh after waking up. Scientists who study memory have found that focused learning during periods of high attention improves retention. Rather than filling my mind with random notifications, I filled it with English. I would listen to a short English podcast, a motivational speech, or a simple conversation. At first, I understood only 50%, sometimes even less, but I refused to stop the audio every few seconds. I trained myself to listen for the overall meaning instead of trying to understand every single word. That simple habit reduced my anxiety and helped my brain adapt to natural English. One mistake many learners make is believing they must know every word before moving forward. Native speakers don't do that. Even they occasionally hear unfamiliar words, yet they continue listening because they understand the context. Learning to tolerate uncertainty is an important step toward fluency. After listening, I repeated several sentences aloud. Not silently, aloud. This technique is called shadowing. It has been recommended by many language experts because it improves pronunciation, rhythm, and speaking confidence. I didn't worry about sounding perfect. My goal was simply to imitate the speaker as closely as possible. At first, it felt awkward. I stumbled over words. My pronunciation wasn't great. Sometimes I laughed at myself, but every mistake became another opportunity to improve. Slowly, my mouth became more comfortable producing English sounds. Words that once felt impossible became natural. Then came another powerful habit that transformed the way I learned vocabulary. Instead of memorizing long lists of isolated words, I learned vocabulary in complete sentences. Imagine trying to remember the word opportunity. It's easy to forget if it's just one word on a flashcard, but if you learn the sentence, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Your brain connects the word with meaning, emotion, and context. That's exactly how children learn their first language. Research in cognitive science supports this approach. Context helps the brain create stronger memories. That's why I stopped chasing thousands of random words and focused on useful expressions I could actually use in real conversations. Every morning I chose 5 new expressions, not 20, not 50, just 5. I read them aloud several times. Then I created my own sentences using each expression. For example, if I learned the phrase, step out of your comfort zone, I might say, speaking English every day helps me step out of my comfort zone. By connecting new phrases with my own life, I remembered them much more easily. Another important lesson I learned was that perfection is the enemy of progress. Many learners stay silent because they're afraid of making grammatical mistakes, but mistakes are not signs of failure. They are signs that learning is happening. Think about how Bobbies learn to speak. They don't wait until every sentence is perfect. They speak, make mistakes, get corrected, and improve naturally. Adults often forget this simple truth. I gave myself permission to sound imperfect. Surprisingly, that decision made me improve much faster. Confidence doesn't appear after fluency. Confidence grows because you practice despite your imperfections. As the morning continued, I added one more habit that strengthened everything else. I kept a small notebook where I wrote every useful phrase I discovered throughout the day. Not complicated grammar rules, not endless vocabulary lists, just practical English that real people actually use. Phrases like, that makes sense, I'm looking forward to it, it's worth trying, or I couldn't agree more. These expressions appeared again and again in movies, podcasts, and conversations. Seeing them repeatedly helped them become part of my natural speech. Gradually, English stopped feeling like a school subject. It became part of my everyday life. And that was only the beginning. Because the real transformation didn't happen in the morning. It happened during the rest of the day, when I discovered a powerful listening and speaking routine that accelerated my fluency faster than I ever imagined. The biggest breakthrough in my English journey didn't happen because I bought a new course or learned hundreds of grammar rules. It happened because I changed the way I listened. For years, I listened to English like a student. I played a video, heard a few unfamiliar words, paused it, looked them up, wrote them down, and repeated the process again and again. It felt productive, but it wasn't helping me become fluent. I was studying English, not living it. So I changed my approach. Instead of focusing on every single word, I focused on understanding the message. I started listening to content that genuinely interested me. If I enjoyed personal development, I listened to motivational speeches. If I liked technology, I watched tech reviews. If I wanted entertainment, I watched interviews, documentaries, or travel videos. Suddenly, English became enjoyable instead of exhausting. This is something language researchers have observed for years. When learning feels meaningful and interesting, the brain pays more attention. That increased attention improves memory and comprehension. In other words, curiosity is one of the most powerful learning tools you already have. Every afternoon, I dedicated about 20 minutes to active listening. I would choose one short video, usually between 3 and 5 minutes long. The first time, I simply listened without subtitles. I didn't panic if I missed something. I focused on understanding the main idea. The second time, I turned on English subtitles. Now I could connect the sounds with the written words. I noticed expressions I had missed before. I paid attention to pronunciation, stress, and rhythm. The third time, I spoke together with the speaker. This is the shadowing technique again, but now it became even more powerful. I copied not only the words but also the speaker's energy, emotion, speed, and intonation. If they sounded excited, I sounded excited. If they spoke calmly, I matched their tone. At first, I couldn't keep up. The speaker seemed incredibly fast, but after a few weeks, something amazing happened. The same videos that once sounded impossible suddenly became easy to understand. The speed hadn't changed. My brain had. That's how language learning works. Every repetition strengthens the neural connections responsible for recognizing sounds. Eventually, your brain stops translating and starts recognizing English automatically. Then I added another simple habit that changed everything. I started talking to myself in English, yes. It felt strange in the beginning, but it worked. Whenever I was cooking, walking, cleaning my room, or getting ready for work, I described what I was doing. I'm making breakfast. I need to finish this task. The weather is beautiful today. I should drink more water. These were simple sentences, nothing impressive, but fluency isn't built through difficult vocabulary. It's built through thousands of simple sentences spoken repeatedly. The more I practiced everyday English, the easier real conversations became. Whenever I didn't know a word, I refused to switch back to my native language. Instead, I explained the idea using simpler English. If I forgot the word umbrella, I might say, the thing you use when it rains. This small habit trained my brain to think in English instead of translating. Many advanced speakers don't know every English word. What makes them sound fluent is their ability to express the same idea in different ways. Communication is more important than perfection. Another daily habit transformed my confidence even more. I started recording my own voice. Every evening, I opened my phone and spoke for 2 or 3 minutes about my day. Sometimes I talked about what I learned. Sometimes I described a movie. Sometimes I explained my goals. When I listened to those recordings, I noticed mistakes I never realized I was making. Maybe my pronunciation wasn't clear. Maybe I repeated the same words too often. Maybe I spoke too slowly. Instead of feeling discouraged, I treated every recording like a progress report. Week after week, my pronunciation improved. My sentences became smoother. My confidence grew. One day, I listened to a recording from 3 months earlier. I could hardly believe it was my voice. The difference was incredible, not because I had become perfect, but because I had become consistent. There's an important lesson here. Most people underestimate what they can achieve in 6 months of daily practice. They expect dramatic improvement after 1 week. When that doesn't happen, they quit. But language learning is like planting a tree. For weeks, it looks like nothing is happening. The roots are growing beneath the surface. Then one day, the tree begins to rise. Your English develops the same way. Progress is invisible until it suddenly becomes obvious. Another powerful habit was replacing passive entertainment with active learning. Instead of scrolling endlessly through social media, I spent at least 15 minutes reading something in English. Not difficult textbooks, not academic articles, simple content I genuinely enjoyed, short stories, news articles, blog posts, self-improvement books, biographies. Every page introduced me to new vocabulary in a natural context. Whenever I found a useful expression, I highlighted it and tried using it later that day. Reading strengthened my vocabulary. Listening improved my comprehension. Speaking built my confidence. Together, they created a powerful cycle of improvement. Little by little, English stopped feeling like something I studied. It became something I lived. But there was still one habit that completely transformed my fluency. The habit that finally helped me stop translating every sentence in my head and start thinking naturally in English. The moment I truly began to feel fluent wasn't the day I memorized my 1,000th English word. It wasn't after finishing another grammar book. And it definitely wasn't after watching hundreds of videos. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Someone asked me a simple question in English for the first time. I answered without translating the sentence in my head. The words just came out, not perfectly, not like a native speaker, but naturally. That single moment showed me something important. Fluency is not about speaking perfect English. Fluency is about expressing your thoughts without constantly fighting your own mind. So how did that happen? The answer was surprisingly simple. I trained myself to think in English every single day. Most learners spend years translating from their native language into English. That process is slow because your brain has to complete 2 tasks instead of one. First, you create the idea in your native language. Then you translate it into English. By the time you're ready to speak, the conversation has already moved on. To break this habit, I started with very small exercises. As I walked outside, I described everything I saw. Sky is cloudy. That man is riding a bicycle. There are 2 children playing football. The traffic is heavier than usual today. Simple observations, simple vocabulary, simple sentences, but every sentence trained my brain to create ideas directly in English. Then I made the exercise slightly more challenging. Instead of describing what I saw, I described what I thought. What should I do this evening? I need to finish reading my book. I think this is a good opportunity. I should practice speaking for 20 more minutes. Little by little, English became the language of my thoughts instead of just another school subject. Another habit completely changed the way I remembered vocabulary. I stopped trying to learn hundreds of new words every week. Instead, I focused on reviewing the words I had already learned. Many people believe forgetting means failure. Actually, forgetting is part of learning. Psychologists have known this for over a century. Without regular review, our brains naturally forget information over time. But every time we review something before completely forgetting it, the memory becomes stronger. That's why I spent 10 to 15 minutes every evening reviewing my notebook. Not memorizing, reviewing. I read the expressions aloud. I created new sentences. I imagined real conversations where I could use them. Soon those expressions became automatic. I no longer had to search for them. They simply appeared when I needed them. Then I discovered another powerful secret. I stopped chasing difficult English. Many learners think advanced vocabulary makes them sound fluent. It doesn't. Listen carefully to successful communicators. They usually use simple words. Their real strength lies in clarity. Instead of saying something complicated, they explain ideas in a way everyone understands. That's exactly what I practiced. Whenever I learned a difficult word, I also learned how to explain the same idea using simple English. This made my conversations much smoother because I never became stuck searching for the perfect word. One evening, I decided to challenge myself. I chose one topic every day and spoke about it for 5 minutes without stopping. Sometimes the topic was my childhood. Sometimes it was my favorite movie. Sometimes it was success, failure, discipline, or happiness. If I forgot a word, I didn't stop. I explained it differently. If I made a grammar mistake, I kept talking. My goal wasn't perfection. My goal was flow. That exercise was difficult during the first week. After 2 months, it became one of the easiest parts of my routine. I noticed something incredible. The longer I spoke, the easier speaking became. Confidence grows through action, not preparation. Then I added writing to my daily routine. Every night before sleeping, I wrote a short journal in English, only 1 page, sometimes even half a page. I wrote about what happened during the day, what I learned, what I was grateful for, what mistakes I made, what I wanted to improve tomorrow. Writing forced me to organize my thoughts. It revealed vocabulary gaps I hadn't noticed while speaking. When I couldn't express an idea, I looked up the correct expression and immediately used it in another sentence. That single habit improved both my writing and speaking at the same time. I also changed one more thing that made a huge difference. I stopped comparing myself to fluent speakers. Comparison destroys motivation. There will always be someone who speaks better than you. Instead of asking, "Am I as good as them?" I asked a different question. "Am I better than I was last month?" That question changed everything. Progress became exciting. Small improvements became victories. Every new phrase I remembered. Every conversation I completed. Every video I understood without subtitles. Every recording that sounded clearer than the last. They were all proof that I was moving forward. Fluency isn't one giant breakthrough. It's thousands of tiny improvements that eventually become impossible to ignore. And finally, after months of following this routine every single day, I realized there was one habit more powerful than all the others combined. It wasn't listening. It wasn't reading. It wasn't speaking. It was the habit that made sure I never gave up, even on the days when it felt like I wasn't improving. The most powerful habit in my entire English learning journey had nothing to do with grammar books, vocabulary apps, or expensive courses. It was showing up. Every single day, even on the days when I felt tired, even on the days when I made mistakes, even on the days when I believed I wasn't improving. Because the truth is, language learning is not a sprint. It's a marathon. The people who become fluent are rarely the most talented. They're the ones who refuse to quit. I stopped asking myself, "Do I feel motivated today?" Instead, I asked, "What's the smallest step I can take today?" Some days I had an hour to practice, other days only 10 minutes, but I never let the chain break. If I could only listen to one English podcast while walking, I did that. If I could only read one page of a book, I did that. If I could only speak for 2 minutes into my phone, I did that. A small action is always better than no action. This mindset completely removed the pressure from learning. I no longer expected perfection. I simply focused on consistency. After a few months, my routine became automatic. I didn't force myself to practice English anymore. It became part of my lifestyle, just like brushing my teeth or drinking water. That's when I realized something fascinating. Fluency isn't created during one incredible study session. It's built during hundreds of ordinary days that most people ignore. Think about professional athletes. They don't become champions because of one amazing workout. They become champions because they train consistently for years. Language learning works exactly the same way. Every conversation strengthens your confidence. Every book expands your vocabulary. Every podcast improves your listening. Every mistake teaches your brain something new. Nothing is wasted. One question people often ask me is, how long did it take you to become fluent? The answer is simple. I stopped counting the months. Instead, I counted the days I stayed consistent. Because fluency isn't a destination where suddenly everything becomes perfect. Even native speakers continue learning new words throughout their lives. Fluency means communicating comfortably, understanding naturally, expressing your thoughts with confidence, making mistakes, and continuing anyway. Another lesson changed my perspective forever. I stopped fearing mistakes. In fact, I started welcoming them. Every mistake showed me exactly what I needed to improve. If I pronounced a word incorrectly, I practiced it. If I used the wrong grammar, I corrected it and moved on. If someone didn't understand me, I explained my idea differently. Mistakes became teachers instead of enemies. That's exactly how children learn their first language. They don't stay silent because they're afraid of sounding wrong. They speak. They learn. They improve. Adults often forget that simple truth. Then something happened that I'll never forget. One day, I watched an English movie without subtitles, to my surprise. I understood almost everything, not because I had memorized every word, but because my brain had learned to understand English naturally. A few weeks later, I joined a conversation with people speaking English. For the first time, I wasn't translating. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't searching for every word. I was simply communicating. That moment wasn't magic. It was the result of hundreds of small, invisible victories. If you're watching this today and feeling discouraged, remember this. The person who speaks fluent English today was once a beginner. They also mispronounced words. They also forgot vocabulary. They also felt embarrassed. The difference is, they kept going. So here's the exact daily routine that changed my life. Every morning, I listened to English for 15 to 20 minutes. I practiced shadowing by repeating sentences aloud. I learned 5 useful expressions in context. Throughout the day, I thought in English whenever possible. I described my surroundings. I spoke to myself in English. I replaced unnecessary scrolling with meaningful English content. In the afternoon, I practiced active listening using short videos. I watched them several times until I understood both the meaning and the pronunciation. I recorded myself speaking for a few minutes every day. I listened carefully, noticed my mistakes, and improved them little by little. In the evening, I read a few pages of an English book or article. I reviewed my vocabulary notebook. I wrote a short journal in English before going to bed. Then, the next day, I repeated the process again, and again, and again. There were no secret shortcuts, no miracle techniques, just a simple routine followed consistently. Imagine where your English could be 1 year from today if you started this routine now. Imagine understanding movies without subtitles. Imagine speaking confidently during job interviews. Imagine traveling without fear. Imagine making friends from around the world. Imagine opening career opportunities that once seemed impossible. That future begins with one decision. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, today. Because every day you delay is another day your future fluent self has to wait. Remember this quote from the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Your journey to English fluency begins with today's practice, not perfect practice, consistent practice. So after this video ends, don't just feel inspired, take action. Listen to one English podcast, read one page, learn 5 useful expressions, speak for 2 minutes. Write one paragraph, repeat tomorrow. Months from now, you'll look back and realize that the fluent English you once dreamed about became your reality. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure to subscribe and join us for more practical English learning strategies every week. Keep learning, keep practicing, keep believing in yourself. And most importantly, never stop showing up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.